to me, the factory was like a playground. Every day I woke up, I'd get excited because there'll be new equipment coming in. You develop a deep appreciation of how technology can be a competitive edge and that it can really change lives.
Jen, I don't really know much about your background, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about where you've come from before starting or being part of gridComm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm from Singapore. I'm actually a first-generation Singaporean. My parents came from China, specifically my dad came from Shanghai. My mom came from Hong Kong. And, they had to move out of Shanghai when the communists took over China. And my granddad and dad moved to Hong Kong. And they were working for an insurance company, now known as AIG. So and of course CV Star was still in charge then, and he was the one who sent my granddad and dad to come down to Singapore to start up the insurance business in Singapore. That's how they ended up there. And my brother, myself and my sister were the first generation Singaporeans that were born there. And it's all thanks to AIG that we live in Singapore.
It's like a public service announcement.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I grew up in Singapore. We were a very middle class family. I went to school there. And of course, when you're Chinese and you're growing up, one of the fixtures in the family is always the grandmother, the dragon lady of the household. And she kept everybody straight. And had a very conventional upbringing, right? You're taught to do well in school. You focus on your studies. Had a very comfortable upbringing. Then from there, I had a chance to go to UK for my undergraduate. Came back. My first job was with Texas Instruments. I did a engineering degree, electronics engineering, and my first job was with Texas Instruments. And I stayed there basically in the same job, moving up the ranks for 34 years.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me about that because it's really strange, right? And then I have to recognize that it is. But in fact, 34 years pass very quick, and it's true because and of course Texas Instruments, when I started work. That was when Singapore was trying to attract big multinational investments to Singapore, and the TI was the second semiconductor company to start a factory there. So many people in my generation who were engineers cut their teeth and look for careers in these very large semiconductor factories. And I was fortunate enough to be there early. And the reality is that although TI was a very tough environment, back then there was no diversity, there was no respect, and it was basically a very tough environment that people operated in. But the good thing about it is that it was very, very exciting to work with the latest technologies. When I grew up in school, I was a very typical nerd. I loved everything electrical. I was a kid who took things apart because I wanted to look at that stuff. And when I was 15, I wanted a hi-fi set, but I couldn't afford it. So I built my own hi-fi. And back then there was no transistors, there were valves. Oh, so there's a couple of people who were shaking their heads. Yeah. And so when I went to and then while I was still in school, the first transistors were invented. So he says, "Wow, this is a transistor," right? And when I was making up my mind about college and what degree to take, the integrated circuit came out, and there was no PC. So all through school, of course in London we had the privilege of playing with all this stuff. We were very well equipped compared to the universities in Singapore. And that's when I made up my mind, hey, this is what I want to do, right? And I still remember during the A-level examinations, when you sit for the general purpose paper, the question was, talk about how computers are going to change the world. That was before the PC. And I actually wrote an essay on that question. So, of course, when I joined TI, already, TI was putting very advanced semiconductors into production in the Singapore factory. So I remember handling things like TI had a microprocessor before. At the same time, Intel were doing the 8080. We had a 64-bit 9900C CPU that we were playing with in Singapore before the PC came out. So that was, and of course, that sustained me for 34 years, because in that 34 years, TI started doing memory products in the Singapore factory. So the first product was a 4K SRAM, then the DRAM came out, and by the time I retired in 2012, it's a 4 gig DRAM, right? Now, so, and that made time pass very quick, because with each generation, every 2 years you'd have new product coming through, you had to solve a whole new set of problems, you had a whole new set of equipment coming in. And to me, the factory was like a playground. Every day I woke up, I'd get excited because there'll be new equipment coming in. And many of this equipment were the first of its kind in the industry, right? First in Singapore, the first here. And for example, in our factory, in semiconductor processing, SEMS for failure analysis, now standard. But it wasn't always that way. When the feature sizes got small enough, you needed a SEM. We had one of the first SEMs in the factory coming in, and I remember having to play with it and trying to figure out how do you use this thing, right? So it was like this for 34 years. Now, as a result of that experience and through that time, there's a couple of things that, number one, you get hooked on the fact that, you want that front row seat into that technology change, right? The second thing you develop, of course, in, being from the semiconductor industry and a very competitive part of the semiconductor industry, you develop a deep appreciation of how technology can be a competitive edge and that it can really change lives. From a 4K SRAM to a 4 gig DRAM, that's a lot of change, right? And of course, you feel very privileged to be part of the journey and experience it at the ground level. So when I had a chance to retire in 2012, I said, look, I don't want to lose that front row seat. And being in Singapore, we're very fortunate to have a government that continues to support science and technology. And so I wanted to be part of that, and I thought the best way to be a part of that is to actually become an angel investor, so that I can get to listen to all this wonderful stuff that people want to do. Right? Unfortunately, what I've learned in the last 5 years is I'm not a very good angel investor. Right? And a couple of the companies that I invested in got into trouble, and and one of them is gridComm, and that's why I'm here today. Because a year ago, I was approached by the founders and said, can you help gridComm? We're in trouble, and I was one of the early investors in gridComm. So I just come off helping another company, and I said, okay, I have time. I think maybe in a year's time I can get this straightened out, and you guys will be in good shape again. And a year later, I'm here trying to figure out, now what do I do next? Right? But it's been a great learning journey. Of course, I'm incredibly privileged to be part of the Unreasonable program and be in the company of such awesome people. But it does make you feel pretty inadequate, coming from a corporate background. Because there's just so much more to this than just what you experience through a corporate history.
What though? I mean, 34 years anywhere is a significant amount of time to gain wisdom and experience. What do you think you've taken from that and applied to gridComm that maybe people without that experience wouldn't be able to apply?
Good question. I think that there are a couple of things I think you learn after 34 years, right? You get extremely quick about raising your hand, right? You get to understand that, look, you can't wing it, right? And you develop a sense that, well, this doesn't look right, because what you learn after 34 years is that you can't get away from the basics. It doesn't matter how high the technology gets. It doesn't matter how big the organization gets. It doesn't matter what your business is or your business model is. There are certain basic rules that apply to technology, the laws of physics, and there are rules that apply to people. You don't get far from that. And what you develop in 34 years is a sense of what are the basics. Now, you have to learn some of the things on how to apply the basics in a new context, right? Because some of these basics are translated to practices in multinationals and large organizations, and the basics are translated into different practice for startups. It doesn't mean that applying the basics, it's never easy in any context. They have different challenges, but as long as you're mindful of these basics and you continue to focus on how you do the basics better and better, I think you after 34 years you get the understanding that you're not going to be far off. Right? So that's what I've tried to bring into the gridComm situation. And of course, this is a great opportunity because I've tried to apply the basics. I depend on the mentors, and today was a great example of a session where you try to apply the basics, and then you have to talk to people and say, well, did I do this right? Right? Because the 34 years in corporate life doesn't necessarily qualify you to translate those basics into practice for a different situation.